welcome everybody to Mary Giuliani Live. I am so thrilled you're here tonight. Tonight I am so excited that I have Shasta Nelson, who is the author of Frientimacy and Friendships Don't Just Happen. She's also the CEO of girlfriendcircles.com. And the reason I invited Shasta to be on the show tonight was because she has had such a profound impact on my friendships just by reading her book. Oh my God. I didn't even realize some of the assumptions I had about friendships and how I was approaching making friendships until I really dug into her books. And as a result, I have like several close friends now that I absolutely love and connect with on a regular basis, and that have actually been instrumental in helping me get onto living my calling, you know. So having that kind of support is really, really key. So before we get started, I always just like to mention that the whole purpose of this show is about transformation. It's all about really supporting you in being aware of what you want in your life, about being true to yourself, about really getting in touch with what you want for your life to make it the best, make you the best version of you, and to really find what you're called to do in the world. So I'm very, very excited to bring this show to you tonight. We also have, so every single week we have different guests that I interview that are all about transformation and that are doing something really exciting. The other cool thing is that I'm really into making sure that we find out a little bit of the backstory of guests so that people can really identify that just because we might be doing these wonderful, exciting things doesn't mean it's always been easy for us, or even that it still is. It's just that, you know, we've stepped out of our comfort zone and we're actually, you know, really going for it. So anyway, if you're on Facebook Live, if you would like to ask Shasta questions, I do field questions, but I do it on my website live version. So if you just go straight up to marygiuliani.net, watch live, there's a chat box right below the live stream, and you can ask Shasta questions there. Also, if you're on the website, please sign up for my newsletter so you make sure you know which questions, or excuse me, which guests are coming up. And also, if you are on Facebook Live, please share this live show while it's live. It really helps a lot of other people be supported in developing great friendships, because to me, friendships are like the most important, the relationships, connections, the most important thing in the world beyond everything else anyway. So let's see, is there anything else I wanted to ask or mention? Oh, if you have a guest in mind that you would like me to interview, please let me know. Email me at marygiuliani.net. Any topics that you want covered, do the same. Also, any questions you might have for me that I can answer on the show, I'd love to do that as well, since I am a coach. So let's see. With that, I want to bring on Shasta Nelson. Like I said, I'm so grateful to her for really digging into this topic and providing such insight and support for all of us in our friendships. And she's the CEO of girlfriendcircles.com, and she can go into a little bit more about that. And also, like I said, she's the author of Frientimacy and Friendships Don't Just Happen. And so let's bring her on right now. Shasta, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. Gosh, as I said, you've made such a huge difference in my friendships. And, you know, a couple of years ago, I realized that I wanted to develop new friendships, and actually I was teaching a class at as a coach, and one of my students that showed up started mentioning friendships don't just happen, and was really passionate about it. And so I bought the book, and here we are, you know.
Oh,
so I really,
that's a great story.
yeah, so I really appreciate you showing up and being here for us. So as I mentioned, I always like to kind of just get a feel for what brought you into this work and maybe your background. So would you mind sharing a little bit about maybe just what inspired you to get involved with, you know, bringing women together for close friendships?
Yeah, I mean, it was something in my own life that I've had to do every time I've moved to a new area or gone through a big life change, or after a divorce, when it feels like all the friendships kind of go up in the air, or just kind of changing jobs and realizing how many of our friendships kind of center around a workplace. But it was really, I was way more motivated when I was coaching myself and kept hearing amazing women repeating, like, having a hard time feeling close to people. I kept saying, who's helping you define what's normal? Who's supporting you? Who's like there for you if you need it? And I just kept hearing
Uh-huh.
over and over women saying, well, I have some friends, but I don't really talk to them about this. And it was really as I saw what I call epidemic of unacknowledged loneliness, this recognition that I wasn't alone and that we all are so networked and we know so many people, but most of us don't feel known and most of us don't feel all that supported or that really in a meaningful, like we don't feel that much intimacy with people, and it kind of just broke my heart.
Totally. I mean, just well, reading your both of your books, but I loved how you went more into it with Frientimacy. Just how, and that was one of my issues actually a couple of years ago. It was embarrassing to admit that I just didn't have the friendships that I really wanted. I thought that people would think there was something wrong with me. And yet you made it so normal, like, of course you're going to lose friendships over the course of time. People's lives change, and it really helped me really not feel uncomfortable about talking about that. So
yeah, we have a really unfortunate stigma around saying that we need friends, and we somehow think that if we admit to loneliness that might be, our ego goes, oh my goodness, that means nobody likes me, or that I'm not a good friend, or that I have no friends. And the truth of the matter is, research is showing that we are actually replacing half our close friends every 7 years. And so if you think about who the handful of people are that any one of us is confiding in at this point in our lives, and we say, okay, these are the 4 or 5 women I feel closest to, well, chances are high that 7 years ago, 2 or 3 of those were different women in our lives. And so we really start realizing that there is an ebb and flow, and the bigger danger comes from not actually constantly replenishing and building and developing more friendships, because we're inevitably going to lose some, and we need to have other ones developed in the meantime.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that I was kind of blown away in your book, Frientimacy, and excuse me for looking away, but I just wanted to make sure I got this right. It talks about how, as far as like the studies of how many confidants that people have today compared to what they had just 5 years ago, something like it's almost like less. There was like people had up to like 3 on an average of people they could really talk to about, really intimate things, and now it's like, what is it, like less than 0? I mean, or 0
well,
or something?
Like 1 is the most common answer, and that's like, and if you think about, even if that just includes our spouses and how many divorces we're going through, but 1 out of 4 of us 1 out of 4 of us say 0. So yeah, that's like having nobody to even feel like we can confide in. And I'm a really big advocate of having more than 1. I always say when I'm teaching women, if you're feeling resentful of your friends for not being there for you, it's often not a sign that our friends aren't good. It's often a sign that we haven't developed enough relationships in our lives to support us. It's our job to make sure we have a circle of friends that at any one time there's somebody who can kind of show up. It's not their job to be there for us 24/7 and always be there, because there's times I'm on book tour. I can't be there in the same way. You have a baby. You can't be there in the same way. You have to go care for an aging mom. We all have lives, and it's unrealistic to expect one person to constantly be available. But we certainly need to be developing a handful so that any given time we have, a net of some choices.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, well, even though we may have like 4 or 5 people that we see on a regular basis, a lot of people, as you had mentioned in your book, are just not feeling the level of intimacy that they're wanting within those friendships. So could you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, there's a very big difference between the people we're friendly with versus the people we have developed a friendship with. And I think that's becoming very confusing for people. There's a difference between having a social life and having people we're confiding in and feel close to. And so it's really important for us when I ask people about their friendships, every single one of us is kind of surprised when we feel loneliness, because we think, well, that's crazy. I have so many friends. And in fact, I'm tired of people. In fact, I don't even have time for everybody I know. And we kind of like have this long litany of evidence, if you will, that we are actually peopled out. And so how can we be lonely? And the truth is, our loneliness isn't coming. Today's profile of loneliness is not somebody who's like a recluse out in the mountains that's not talking to anybody and is socially awkward. And today's lonely person is a very busy, networked, exhausted person who's serving people and probably seeing people all day long. And so our loneliness isn't coming from a lack of interaction. It's coming from a lack of meaningful interaction with a few people where it can be comfortable and familiar and meaningful.
Right. I mean, it's so interesting because I'm hearing a lot of different thought leaders talk about how even though we have just so many ways that we can connect with each other digitally, yet we're feeling less connected. And the other, just to kind of back up a little bit, the other thing that I remember thinking to myself before I read your books was, well, okay, so I have 2 or 3 friends that I see every now and then or whatever. And so maybe I didn't feel the level of intimacy, but I would sort of put it on myself, like, well, I should be sort of independent enough to like feel like I can meet my own needs, you know. And the reality is that we're social beings. It's normal and natural to need connection.
Yes, and we are now seeing with neurofunction, the ability to do MRI scanning, and what we're being able to research in the last 10 years is really debunking the way most of us were raised. The common psychology around needing to be independent is really being debunked. You nailed it. We are wired for intimacy. We're wired for love. This is a natural thing. So I always talk about loneliness as a feeling of information in our body. It's not something to be shunned any more than we would like try to deny if we were hungry. Like when I feel hungry, I don't sit there and be like, oh, this is awful. I should be like, what's wrong with me? You know, and the truth of the matter is it means I'm healthy and normal, and I should know what hunger feels like, and I should feel hunger several times a day. And that's a very healthy thing. And I should feel tired when I don't get enough sleep. And I should feel lonely when I'm craving more connection. And that's our body's way of saying that I have capacity to receive or to give more love in my life right now. It's a beautiful thing. There's no judgment. It's our body saying, I have more to give. I have more to receive.
I know. And that was so helpful. Like, because I remember, I don't know if you're probably too young for this, but I remember thinking way back when I was sort of feeling really lonely, like, I feel like Lucy in that episode where she goes to the Friends of the Friendless.
I haven't seen that one. It sounds good.
Oh, but it was like she was just feeling so lonely, like, but having shame about it, you know, like there was something wrong with her. And so thank you for normalizing it and giving us some tools to really address it. And so what I love about the Frientimacy book is that you go into, you know, you really have to recognize you have the gap, and that there's this, I love the Frientimacy triangle. Would you mind sharing a little bit about the triangle and how it can help?
Absolutely. And let me just say, not only should we not be feeling shame around having that feeling, if anything, emotional intelligence says that we healthy women will feel these things, and the healthiest among us will do something about it. So the shame isn't in having a feeling, it's in avoiding it or denying it or ignoring it or in a way. So absolutely, no shame. And so the Frientimacy triangle is what I do to help teach what healthy relationship is. And so Frientimacy is friendship intimacy. I coined that word several years ago because I kept talking about how we all need more intimacy, and everybody's brains just kept going to sex. And I kept saying, no, intimacy is not the same as sex. Sex is one form of intimacy, but I'm not talking about sex. I'm talking about the feeling of being known and safe and connected to somebody. And we all are dying for more of that. And so the definition of a healthy friendship is 3 things. It absolutely has to have all 3 of these, or it is not a healthy friendship. It has to have positivity. Positivity is the first one. It has to be positive. Above all else, none of us woke up this morning saying, I wish I had a few more needy, complaining, whiny people crying on my shoulder and making me feel bad that I'm not doing enough for them. And so at the end of the day, we are choosing these relationships because there's some reward in them. These are the relationships we're choosing, and they have to feel good and enjoyable. And I can talk more about that. But at the end of the day, there has to be more good than bad.
Yes.
Yeah, the second requirement is consistency. We have to repeat this process. You and I could have an amazing conversation and just absolutely have so much positivity and admire each other and affirm each other and share so much. And if we never do it again, then we're not friends. So we have to be repeated, and there has to be a history built, and that's where trust happens. When we have consistent time, like regular time put in, that's where we start learning to trust each other's consistency, because we're starting to show up in a consistent way. And the third requirement of all healthy relationships is vulnerability. Because again, at the end of the day, we have a good time and we can do it regularly, so we could be positive and consistent. But at the end of the day, if we're not actually sharing and revealing and opening up more of ourselves, then we aren't really, at the end of the day, we won't feel really loved, because our brain will say, but they don't really know us. And that's where we start feeling supported, and that's where we start feeling known, and where we start feeling seen. And so those are 3 requirements. And I always say, if I can guarantee that any friendship in your life that is not feeling meaningful or fulfilling right now, it's because at least one of those 3 is in lack. And you can always start identifying, how to repair a friendship based off of that. You can fix any relationship if you understand those 3 requirements.
Yeah, and it was so brilliant, the 3 requirements, because it really helps you just sort of narrow down, like, okay, so when I looked at my friendships, when I look at them today, I can see which ones, could use some more of this ingredient or this ingredient. You know what I thought would be really fun for our viewers is to, and by the way, viewers that have just tuned in, you can ask Shasta your questions by going to themarygiuliani.net, watch live, and there's a little chat box right below the stream. Anyway, I thought it would be really cool to go through each one of these, like, positivity and vulnerability and consistency. So, yeah, and on the positivity one, I was really very surprised when you had put that you really need to have a ratio of 5 to 1, positive versus negative. So say more about that.
Yeah, there's some great research now where they're actually able to track, and this is true of marriages, of all relationships, where so what's cool about the ratio is we have to have 5 positive interactions for every 1 negative interaction. And what's really empowering about this is that women will say, but what about the crying on each other's shoulder? And what about the complaining and the venting? And what about the being there for me? And so, yeah, we want those things. But we need to recognize our job in any relationship is to make sure that we walk away having that other person feel better about themselves and their life for having been with us. And so even if we're in crisis, even if we're hurting, we can certainly at times make more withdrawals in the relationship, might be the way of saying it, but it's still our job to make deposits in the relationship as well. So we can say thank you for listening. We can say, I'm still curious about your life, and how are you doing? We can still affirm them for how well they are there for us. We can still say, you know what, I'm in such a tough space right now, but we just need to go out for one night and have fun and just forget this for one night. You've really supported me, and let's just go out and play for a night or go to a comedy club. And so there's so many ways, even when we're hurting, it's not about being Pollyanna. It's about acknowledging that we'll always be stressors. We will always have things going on. We will always disappoint each other. There will always be some angst in a friendship that we might have to be talked through. Unmet expectations, but we can always add more positivity, and we have to. If we don't pay attention to that, then our relationship starts feeling exhausting and wearisome, and people their brain may not even be conscious, but they're not going to want to hang out with you again if they leave feeling bad about themselves or exhausted every time.
Right. Well, totally. And it was like. What was interesting for me is when you had written about how when the positivity is low, it's usually because we think we're giving more than we're getting, and then you go into, and I love this, how many women give in order to feel loved or give from a place of emptiness, and then sort of resent it. And I would love for you to address this, because it's a way that we can own how we're showing up with our giving versus just being unconscious about it.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I do a whole chapter on this subject because it is so big. Almost any audience I speak in front of, I say, how many of you are the givers, the primary giver in your friendships? And like 99.9% of the hands go up. And I always say, research shows that 84% of us say we have a toxic friend. So the irony of this is either we're all friends with the same 16% of complete leeches who are like the receivers of all of our love, or we are the toxic, the receiver from somebody else. Like we are not judging this actor. And so there's so many reasons. But I give the example in the book, and this happened so many times. But in that case, it was great because I actually knew both people. But it's so funny. I mean, I think about this. sometimes we only keep track of what we do. You know, like there was this one story of this person who's like, I'm breaking up with her because I'm always the one that does all the giving. I gave her the graphic design work for my husband's business, and I helped her with her son's wedding.
Yeah.
And, you know, she went down the list of everything she had done to give. And like 2 days later, I happened to run into the other person, and unbeknownst to her, that I had even seen the other girl, she was saying, have you seen so-and-so lately? I think we're like, I'm so over her. I do all the giving in that relationship. She just talks
Oh
and
my
jabs.
God.
I do all the listening. And she's like, and then she asked me to do all this graphic design work for her husband at a discount, and I like did all this extra hours. And I just thought, isn't that classic that they both think they're the ones over giving? And I said, that's really sad. That there's a problem here of them not either seeing what the other's giving, of it not being in the right ways in a meaningful way. They're not receiving. And so there's a whole bunch of options in the book of talking about what we can do. That sometimes it's not about giving less, but about figuring out how to receive more, which means asking for what we need so that we can make sure that what we actually need is what we're getting.
Absolutely, and I was so thrilled to see you cover this because that's one of my passions with my work as a coach, is really helping women to be true to themselves. And since our culture, as you I'm sure are obviously very aware, we're socialized as women to be the givers. We're socialized to put other people's needs before our own. And in many cases, you know, when we're raising children and that sort of thing, you know, there's certain things that you need to do. I mean, although I do love the airline stewardess saying of put the oxygen mask on yourself first, because you can't help anybody if you're dead. But the point being is that so many women have so much guilt and shame about putting themselves first or asking for what they need, since they're so rewarded around giving. And so I'm so glad you're addressing this. So what are some things... Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think one of the most tragic things of this, if we don't, I found that most of us need to actually stop and ask, what do I actually need to receive, to feel good, and to feel loved? And most of us don't even have a quick answer to that. So, but then yet we're upset at our friends for not being able to know that. And I think that's kind of crazy. If we can't even know that about ourselves, why would we put that on somebody else to guess? But if once you even stop and say, actually, what I just need is for them to just listen tonight, then I need to ask for that. I want my needs met, and my odds go up exponentially if I say to my friends, oh, thank you so much for your good advice, but you know, as I'm receiving it, I just think, actually, I think I'm telling this story because I just want to be heard and just want to vent. So I really actually, you don't need to solve my problem. I just need to like complain. Is that okay? And every time I've done that, everyone's like, oh yeah, yeah. And they're like, there. And I have just now asked for what I needed. And now I've increased my odds of leaving that time having my needs met and feeling loved and feeling heard, and then not feeling like I'm always the one doing all the, you know, blah, 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 and whatever narrative of my official martyr that I do. I would rather get my needs met and learn to receive, which means learning to figure out what it is I need to receive and do what I can strategically to get that met. And that's on us. We can't, it's not our job, it's not our friends' jobs to get what we need. It's our job. Because I think it's really tragic to think of a whole but 99% of women all overgiving, thinking they're overgiving, and nobody feeling like they're receiving. I mean, that's just tragic. We're not doing something right. Right, exactly. And you know, the other piece that I thought was so perfect that you brought in was when we're giving as a well, we kind of touched on it, but I think we can go deeper here, is when we give as a reason to feel loved, not because it's like a duty and obligation, or basically I'm going to give because that's how I get love, and it's not really coming from a pure, authentic contribution place. Yes. Can you share a little bit about that? Yeah, I think that, so one of the metaphors I've been working with lately that I've learned about, are you familiar with the Enneagram? I love the Enneagram work. Yes. But one of the phrases that came to me recently around the Enneagram work is recognizing that all of us do different behaviors to try to feel loved and to try to feel like we're enough, and to start having awareness around what is motivating our different actions. And so the phrase that's been helpful to me is do I have a center of dignity? Am I standing in one spot straight and strong, or am I grabbing and leaning and pulling and trying to, you know, constantly convince myself and reassure myself of connection? And I think a lot of us, the need to be needed is how we confuse that and think that if we're not needed, if we're not giving, somehow we're not lovable. And I think we really need to do the work of separating that and say that is a fear that I need to practice saying, I don't need to constantly be giving and meddling and texting them and like just doing all of this just for my own ego to say, okay, good, they're still there. And we really do. It's personal work. Our relationships can only be as healthy as we are willing to be with ourselves, not because people can't love us more than we love ourselves, but because we won't ever actually be able to receive it and hold it if we have a leak in our own bucket, you know? So I do believe I can love people better sometimes than they love themselves, but if they can't, they need to learn how to at least patch the holes so they can receive the love people are giving them. Like it's our job to be healthy so that we can show up and get the full benefit of that love.
Right, absolutely. You also have a statement here about if your own light is dim or flickering, then perhaps maybe you need to set some boundaries and limit the time with the people that you feel can't support the happier and more powerful version of you. How would you elaborate on that?
Yes. So one of the things when we go back to positivity is interesting because a lot of women will leave an interaction and say, I just don't like her because I always feel so bad about myself. And we project on the other person that because she has money or because she has the kids we want or because she has the house we want, we'll often leave feeling bad, and our brains will think it's her that made us feel bad. And it's our job to recognize that person may not have done anything mean, evil, bad. We just had a hard time holding our confidence in that space. We started feeling jealous or envious and kind of self-judged ourselves, and so we left feeling like our light was dim. And so I think it's really important to do the hard work of asking ourselves, like, am I leaving feeling bad because she actually is doing something harmful and negative? Or am I leaving bad because I need to practice like standing in that space? And if I'm leaving, like, so maybe there are times where we need to limit who we're around only until we let, but the purpose should not be because she's at fault. It should be because I'm doing the work of like being able to stand in my own light in that space without having to feel like I need to shrink or that something's wrong with me or to be overcome with shame.
Right, exactly. You know, one of my favorite, I think so many people use her too, Byron Katie.
Yes.
So it's like, I think the perfect thing to do when you feel like maybe somebody's not holding the highest space for you is it's like, well, she's not supporting me. Well, is that true? Can you know 100% true that she's not supporting you? I mean, really? Yes. And really just investigate whether, and I love the saying, it's like, am I making it up? And like you're saying, our brains try to figure out why we're feeling the way we are, and it's a lot easier to blame someone else than to really look within. So
much. And I have a philosophy that our friendships are the gym, the health clubs where we do our personal growth. And so I truly believe that our friendships are the place where I should be practicing saying no and holding my boundaries. This is the place I should practice shining and owning my beauty and my strength. Right. This is the place I should practice asking for what I need. This is, if I can't do it with friends, with people who we claim to like each other, then what chance do I have of showing up in this world and doing it in front of a whole bunch of people who will criticize me and who are not my fans?
Absolutely.
And so I really believe that as awkward as it might be in our friendships, when it feels awkward, when we have those moments, that's where I'm like, okay, roll up the sleeves. Like, this is where the rubber hits the road. This is where I put my tennis shoes on. I go to the gym, and this is where I'm like, this is where my relationships are showing me where my next edge of personal growth needs to be. And I don't shy away. I don't shy away from that. I don't blame the other person. I'm just like, okay, we go to the gym expecting to sweat. When we go to a physical gym, we don't like panic when we start getting short of breath. So that's what we're there for. And yet in our
it's uncomfortable. We're stretching. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the whole point. And yet in our friendships, as soon as it feels a little uncomfortable or like we start kind of emotionally sweating, we like think, oh, this must mean it's bad. And we just pull away. And I think, oh, that's where the growth happens. Lean in.
Well, and and it's so true. And a couple things I want to say on that is that before I had done a lot of my own growth, it was too terrifying for me to have to face that kind of conflict because of the feelings that it could bring up for me or the rejection or whatever. And so what I would say to people out there that are really, really uncomfortable to the point where they won't address conflict is go to therapy. I mean, work it out so that
Yeah.
you can, or or talk to your other friends about it, and and buy Shasta's book, because there's a lot of great information in here. But I guess I just want to say, for everybody's wherever they are on their path, and now, like for example, just today, after reading your Frientimacy book, and it kept everything so like fresh in my mind, I actually had the opportunity to practice with a friend that I felt didn't have the empathy that I wanted for because I was sick recently, and I'm a real law of attraction person and everything, and it was like I felt like instead of her just saying, hey, wow, I'm really sorry to hear you're feeling bad, it was more like, oh well, what did you do to cause the law of attraction to make you sick? And I believe in the law of attraction, but I also know that I need empathy too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it was like I was able to just say it, and she was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and it was fine. But if I hadn't something little like that, if I hadn't asked for what I needed and shared what I needed, it would have just been that one little piece that would start pulling us apart. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And what I love about that story, Mary, is I think one of the biggest, most dangerous myths around friendships for most women is this belief that there's this perfect best friend out there. And I know when I say it, we go, oh, no, I don't believe that. And yet I cannot tell you, when I really push back the layers with women, most of us think that our perfect best friend wouldn't make that mistake that your friend did, and that we shouldn't have to work at it. And we kind of think that I just haven't met her yet, and we just need to keep looking for her. And so we have a whole bunch of women thinking that they have to just meet people and meet people and meet people.
Right.
And no, you don't have to meet people. You have to make a friendship, which means you have to develop it, which means positivity, consistency, and vulnerability. And those three things, you can make a friendship with anybody. And the more you practice those three things, the healthier the friendship will be. And to your point, if you hadn't done that, like by doing that, you created a healthier friendship. And by not doing that, you would have started eroding the friendship, and you wouldn't have gotten what you ultimately want at the end, which is a close friend that you can trust and that you can go back and forth on, and have disappointments and have rough edges, and have the confidence that you'll make it. So it's a beautiful thing you did.
Yeah, thank you. And what you share about that just drove it home, and I really think just the fact that I just recently read your book, it just reminded me of how important it was to sort of address that right away, because I noticed I was like, I don't know, I could tell that I was having a judgment about it, and I'm like, just address it, and that how you do go into the book, how we think that, like you just said, if we just meet the right person with the right level of consciousness and growth and blah blah blah, that we'll just sail off into the sunset with our BFF. And the reality is that we're going to have conflict. It's part of the deal. And so if we can just accept that that's part of the deal, that's part of cutting your teeth in a friendship, if you will, and just accept it. Yeah. And
we understand that in our romantic relationships. Like, we understand that when we have a fight and survive it, we feel like we trust the other person better. Like, we feel like we've been through stuff together, and we feel safer. Couples describe feeling like they can trust that relationship because they've survived things. We understand that, but when it comes to our friendship, even in romance, like, we might not like conflict, but I watch my girlfriends, they're dating, I watch them eventually. It might take a while, but they will eventually have the conversation that says, you know what, this isn't working for me. My need, like, I don't like it when you do that, and this isn't helping me. And like, we'll kind of start with our friendships. If somebody's not doing it the way we want, we just kind of like chalk it up to them not being a good friend, and I haven't met the right person, and I don't need that. And we kind of get all this like attitude, and then we walk away, and we just kind of keep, and then we wonder why 75% of us are experiencing a loneliness of not feeling satisfied in our friendships, because most of us aren't going through the conflict and sticking with something long enough to enjoy the benefits of intimacy on the other side.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, because that is so key. Because I want to make sure we get to some of these, I want to get to the vulnerability and the consistency, but also to the obstacles, because those are really, really helpful too. So talk about how the other piece of the triangle is vulnerability, and why that's so important.
Yeah, so in the book, I lay it down as a triangle with positivity on the bottom. That's the foundation. If we lose positivity, the whole thing kind of crumbles. On the other two sides of the triangle is consistency and vulnerability. And those two arms should grow incrementally in small ways together. And so our goal is, as our consistency increases, so should our vulnerability increase, with Frientimacy being at the top of the triangle. So we should never be vomiting our entire life story on somebody we just met, thinking that we just need to be vulnerable and therefore that'll make us close. No, our vulnerability should reflect the level of commitment and the level of consistency that we have developed. So with somebody that we're going out on a coffee date with and networking, it's not appropriate to be super vulnerable. And that should increase as our time together increases. And those two are just so connected. I find with my friends that even like we talk about, some of us have good friends that live away, long distance, and we describe them as the people we can pick up where we left off, for example.
Right.
There might be long stretches of time in between, and we sometimes talk ourselves out of calling them because we'll say, oh, it'll take too long to catch them up, and so we understand that the more time that passes, the less consistent we are. We understand that our vulnerability drops because we're spending more time catching each other up and updating and sharing and going closer. So with my girlfriends that I'm closest to, the more often I'm talking to them, if I'm talking to them weekly or even daily, those are the friends that I actually feel like they know my day-to-day life. They know that I'm going to be in Seattle this weekend. They know what's going on in my life. So that's where the vulnerability is going to. You're going to feel supported and seen because those friends know your life. If you're only talking to a friend or seeing them once every other month, you might know they're there for you, and that if something big happens, they would be able to be present. But that's where our vulnerability lacks, because we can't be that 1 hour lunch every 2 months isn't going to provide that much space for getting past how are the kids, how's the job, and now your time's over and you've left. And so the more consistent we are, the more vulnerability that allows and happens.
I didn't really, for some reason I didn't put that together, how the vulnerability and the consistency really sort of like parallel each other. And then let's see, what else about, like vulnerability, just what gets in the way of people being vulnerable in relationships?
Yeah, so several things. And in my book, I teach 5 different acts of vulnerability because I think it's really important. We have a lot of talk in our culture about vulnerability being like sharing our insecurity and shame, which is beautiful. But that's not all. Vulnerability is also, I find that it's actually more difficult for some women. It feels very vulnerable to talk about what's going well in their life or where they're shining or what's going, I've had friends who say, I actually feel really ashamed for making so much money, or feel like I can't talk about it because I know that so when you all start complaining about money, I feel like I need to be relatable, but I can't, I feel kind of embarrassed about it. Or I've heard people feel like they have to talk about
I feel like I need to dim my light kind of thing.
Yeah. Or downplay our successes. We have so much research that says women underestimate what we do and downplay our success. I mean, I have a rule with my friends that we should be practicing shining our light in front of each other. So tell me what you're proud of in your life right now. Like, brag for a minute. Tell me how amazing your kids are. Tell me what you're enjoying about life. Tell me how much you're rocking your job. And so a lot of women find that more vulnerable than like some of us are more comfortable complaining and venting than we are shining. So I teach 5 different acts of vulnerability, and I think all of us need to practice. Look at them. Like another one is, if your relationship is primarily at work, you actually might feel vulnerable. You might feel close, but an act of vulnerability would be inviting her to do something outside of work, and that might feel kind of scary at first. But every time we're increasing the territory of our relationship and doing a different act of vulnerability, we're gluing another piece of our lives with that person. And so we want to practice expanding the activities we do, expanding what we talk about, expanding how we talk, expanding what we're asking for. And so, it's really important. So it's not just talking about sharing our secrets and like vomiting our life story on each other.
No, that's so key. Thank you so much for kind of expanding on that and really going into it. The other thing I want to talk about is consistency, because I had some major, as I shared with you a little bit before the interview, it's so key about time and stuff like that. Would you mind, well, actually, before we go forward, I have a question for you, so it's a perfect time. Candace Johnson asks, when you are shining, are there any tips on being able to do that without coming across as conceited or full of yourself?
That's a great question, Candace. And that is everyone's greatest fear, is that we don't want to be seen as arrogant or because we want to be relatable. I love with my friends asking the question, like, let's all go around the circle and just share one thing we're proud of in our lives right now.
Nice.
And kind of creating it as a norm that we're all going to do. And then or if that's not the right setting, I've tried to practice with my friends just even saying it. Like, I've really been trying to be more positive about myself lately and wanting to try to practice owning where I'm doing well. There's so many things I don't do well, but there's some things I do well. And so I wanted to make sure I told you, I just wanted to make sure I didn't forget. I wanted to tell you about the speaking appointment I had last weekend. It was so rewarding. It felt so good. It made me focus more on the feeling. At first, if it's uncomfortable to practice thing, it just felt so, I felt like I was effective. Like, it felt really rewarding. I felt like I was up there and like what I was doing mattered, so maybe focusing on feeling and on like why it felt good rather than like, I looked amazing and I was like so funny and like maybe that's hard. Maybe that's harder to do. I would love to get to the point with our friends where we could just say that. But if we're kind of practicing it, maybe practicing it from a feeling perspective, because all of us understand those feelings, and our friends would want to, I think, and then say, how about you? What's one thing you've done that's felt really good lately? And kind of immediately help open up the space for them.
Yes, perfect. Sharing that affirmation of each other. I love that. Thank you. And thanks for the question, Candace.
Yeah, good question.
Let's get into the consistency, because it really, like I said, it struck a chord for me that I really feel is so important. And so share with our viewers why consistency is so key on the three triangles, or the three pieces of the triangle.
Well, this is where trust happens. This is where safety happens. So it is incredibly crucial, and this is where our memory banks get built up. This is basically our kind of, if you will, the bucket of all the time we spend together goes into this spot. And then consistency means the regularity, the history building. This is where we end up feeling more of a commitment to each other because of the hours put in. When we were teenagers, we put in, I forget the statistics. I mean, it's crazy how many thousands of hours we put in with our friends by spending all the weekends. And now you think about, and even slumber parties back then, like we just put the time in. And I still, to this day, am a big fan of slumber parties and girls' weekends and kind of more luxurious, spacious days together. Because I'll tell you what, if it's limited to lunches, or just like an hour and a half, it takes. I mean, you just think about it. How many of those appointments it would take to even match spending one whole day together? But our goal in this is just to recognize that a relationship's oxygen is time together. And so we can't make memories if we're not spending time together. We ultimately can't be vulnerable if we're not spending time together. We can't be positive and add value and joy to each other if we're not like connecting. Right. And so that's just, we have to, that's where we meet. That's where we connect. Absolutely.
And the thing that really struck me is where you go into, and excuse me, I'm reading here, but I want to get it right.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, that you mentioned that not having time for connections with our friends is the number one complaint you hear as to why it's so hard to establish relationships. And then you go into how, according to scientists, like having strong social bonds is probably the most meaningful contribution to happiness. And so we're letting ourselves really get sucked into this idea that we need to make more money and work harder and buy all these things and thinking that it's going to make us happy, when the reality is we're social beings and we need connection, and it doesn't matter if we can't sleep with our money or our things or not, or connect with those things. So could you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and here's the irony, and I don't know if I can communicate this well. I think so often much of the consumerism and the buying and the job and all that stuff is subconsciously our attempt to impress people, subconsciously our attempt to feel valued by each other. And it's like this roundabout way we're going to try to feel loved. And the irony is, I just think, what if we just skipped all this, like all this and just go spend time together and feel loved? Like, what would that look like if we stopped worrying about trying to impress each other and spend more time relating to each other? And so I think
God, that's so,
we live in a world that just has really, really, I think we just think it's normal. I mean, it's kind of like being sleep deprived. We don't even know what it would feel like to be well rested. I think we don't even know how good life could be if we just lived a life where we were built around relationships more. What we're doing now might be normal for right now, but that doesn't mean it's the way it should be or the way it has always been or the way that is best for us. And so it's countercultural, but I'm trying to create a movement of humans who remember that our job is to be in loving relationships and spend more time doing that.
Right. And thank you so much for, I mean, this could be a whole show unto itself. And actually 2 years ago is when I made a commitment to myself that relationships and my health were the two main priorities for me. And that's when I found your book and everything. And I mean, just really quick, I want to get to something else, but the advertising and media world has just brainwashed us, and combine that with corporate and stuff. It's like everybody has I guess what I want to say is, and we talked a little bit about how we're both David Hawkins people too. We're vulnerable. What we take into our minds and our brains, we believe, and we don't realize that all of this advertising is really making us believe that we are what we own or how we impress. And so thank you for shining the light on that. And I'm really glad you're doing the work around this too. So yay!
Thank you. And I would love to add on to your beautiful commitment for relationships and health, and just reiterate for everybody listening, the research around the most important factor of our health is our relationships. Right now, how you answer the question of how supported and loved do you feel in your life is the #1 factor of how healthy or how likely you are to be dead or sick in 20 years. It is staggering that there was one research study that showed those who had healthy lifestyle behaviors and those who didn't, those who felt loved and connected and those who didn't, and they followed these 4 groups of people around, and it won't surprise anybody that those who felt connected and were doing healthy lifestyle choices were the healthiest and lived the longest. But it might surprise some of you to know that the second highest category was not those who had healthy lifestyle behaviors of diet and nutrition and exercise, but were actually the ones who felt connected and had unhealthy behaviors actually scored higher in health and longevity and lower stress. And there's so many studies. I could do an entire 1 hour. I do entire keynotes for hospitals and healthcare institutions around the health benefits. Really, when we talk about health and relationships, the two are so tied to each other that if we cared about our relationships, I would go on. There's some doctors going on record saying there is nothing, not genetics, not sleep, not smoking, not exercise, not diet, that has a bigger impact on your health, longevity, and happiness than how connected you feel.
Absolutely. Thank you. I so wholeheartedly agree with you. And yeah, I mean, I think how do you free your time up to, for me at least, it was like, I got to get out of the rat race. I got to get out of the rat race, which meant for me is I needed to make a very conscious decision on how I was going to earn money and how I was going to have expenses in my life, because, I knew that was going to impact the kind of time and financial freedom in my relationships. And so I think that's a whole other subject as well. But the point here is that you have to dedicate, as you say, time to relationships, and if you don't, you're gonna suffer in physical and emotional ways. So, thank you. Yes. All right. So let's go on to the obstacles. Like these, obviously, we've already gone into some of them, but excuse me, let me get my notes here. Well, I just want to say I loved how you said, I view my friendships as investments. They're sacred containers where I've stored time, energy, love, memories, and vulnerability. So beautiful. Yeah. It's just, so share a little bit about that.
Well, on that note, people often ask me how to know when to end a friendship or not. And I always say, my rule of thumb is that the more I've invested in it, like the more that container has all those things in it, those are the people I'm those are the people those are the relationships I'm willing to kind of go down fighting for. Those are the relationships, like no matter how awkward it feels, no matter how scared I feel, to have the tough conversation, to speak up for my needs, to tell her it hurt my feelings, to say this isn't working, whatever the thing is we're afraid of, the more I've invested, the closer we are, the more intimacy we've built, the more I'm willing to practice and have those tough conversations and take those risks. You know, if it's somebody I've just met and that container hasn't been filled up with all those things, then I may be a little less, I might be like, okay, well, that's fine. Like, I'm not going to force anything or make that happen, but I'm willing. I have watched too many people invest a lot in relationships and then have unmet expectations and come and they raise their hands at my talks and will say, what would you do in this situation? And they like vomit this horrible story of how somebody hurt their feelings or wasn't there for them when their mother died or didn't help them move or did something insensitive. And I'll always say, well, what did she say when you told her how you felt? And like, I don't think I've never had anyone say to me, I told her. Like, everyone's just like, oh, well, I mean, I didn't say anything to her. And I'm like, so you let that ruin your friendship. And we've created a story that's a betrayal or that she's selfish, and we attach all these things to it. And I'm like, she may not have even ever intended to hurt you. She might be horrified to know she hurt you, like, but you didn't give her a chance to like have that repair moment. So yeah, when you describe that quote of that investment, I think that's a sacred container that I will do everything I can to protect and to take care of and to take care of my investment. Like the more, it takes a long time to build love and intimacy. I'm not going to walk away.
Absolutely. Oh, it was so beautiful the way you described that, and thank you for sharing that whole concept, because that's what it's about, is investing and valuing the sacred connection that you do have and working on it.
And your example of your friend matches that today. You know, if it was somebody you just met and she was like kind of saying, what did you bring into your life to make you sick? You may not be like, oh, it's not worth it, maybe. You know, you might not choose to have a big conversation or risk her hurt feelings or something. But yeah, you look at that bucket and you say, you know what, we've practiced, we're showing up for each other. I'm going to trust that relationship can handle this, and I'm going to say how it felt to hear that, you know, and try to do this differently.
Well, let's get into one of the obstacles, jealousy and envy. The fear, you have jealousy and envy, the fear they're too good. Yeah,
this is a big one. This hurts a lot of friendships. We live in a world where it's very easy for us to want to devalue anybody who makes us not feel good. And we kind of talked about this earlier, where sometimes we will say them having this great life doesn't make me feel good, so I don't want to be around them. We kind of blame them. Well, we need to own like the recognition that life is not a teeter-totter, and by them having something doesn't make us less likely to have it. We don't need to ask ourselves, am I truly wanting her to not have this, you know, or am I just clearly wanting to? And that's just information that something she has matters to me too. I want that. It changes the energy to say, actually, can I learn from her? How did she get that? Or can I be inspired by her? Can I choose to affirm that in her and make room in my life for that same thing, you know, and to pay attention to the good that comes with that. So there's so much we can gain, but we have to kind of own. It comes back to not letting that tear apart our friendships. And I actually have a practice with my friends where we actually kind of admit to each other when we feel jealous and envious, you know, and it kind of changes the energy. Yeah, I mean, I'll just say to one of my friends, like, I'm not going to lie, I feel really jealous that you can just go do that. I'm really happy you can do it, and I wouldn't want you to not be able to do it, but I just have to, I won't, I can't show up and not have that bias of, wishing I could have that too, you know, or something.
Right. Well, and that's totally honest. I mean, you're just being honest. You're not, and what I'm hearing is you're not asking her to dim her light or anything. You're just saying,
Yeah. And that's where I say, so I want to practice cheering for you the whole way through. I'm so excited you're pregnant even though I can't. Or I'm so excited that you have money. We all have those things that are hard for us to be around. And I think we need to say, I want to be somebody who doesn't need to not hang around people who have kids just because I couldn't, or not hang around people who have money just because I feel broke, and actually say, what can I do to show up and say, you know what, this is hard for me, but I am going to cheer for you. I'm going to applaud you, and can I come play with your kids? You know, whatever the case, what can we do to help not have that be this barrier in our friendships? Super important. It's hard, but important.
Well, and it's just, speaking the truth of what is in the space of your friendship. And like, you did go into, there's a couple of different types of, I think it was jealousy or envy. One was like the resentful envy, and then what was the other one?
Yeah, there's an applauding, and then there's a resenting one on both of those.
Right.
Yeah.
And you kind of described the applauding. What happens if you're on the other end, which is holding ourselves back, the fear they think we're too good? Let's say you're on the other end of somebody just making remarks that are, you can tell that there's like a resentment that you're doing really well.
Yeah, so one of my favorite, so I do a whole chapter in the book on jealousy and envy, and then I'm very excited because a lot of people will talk about that, but I was really excited to write an entire chapter on what to do when people are jealous or envious of us, because I think that plays out a lot in different ways. And again, I think it's helping, I kind of try to interpret that as kind of their own fear and their own insecurities, and that I can help. Well, yeah, one of the examples I share in the book, I mean, from a very young age, I remember my mom saying, just let your sister be the one who's the artist. She needs an area, like where you're not interfering and shining. And I kind of created this story in my head that said, oh, if I'm shining, it prevents other people from shining. And I had to process that as an adult and say, wow, I really need to, what I need to do is not dim my light, but help shine the light on other people too. And so my job now is not to play a smaller game or to dim my light, but my job is to do everything I can to like lift up my friends and to shine a light on them and make sure my light is so big that I can help them see their light as well. And so I watched a lot of us, walk away just kind of chalking it up to they're jealous of me and letting that end a friendship. And I would much rather say, how can I help that friend? How can I name that? How can I show up and say, what can I help you do to get what you need to get? What are you feeling called to right now? And kind of helping be a support where I'm shining my light on them the way I would want them to do it for me.
Absolutely. That's so key. Well, we're running out of time here, but God, I could go another hour with you. But I just want to also just get to, you also have a great section about measuring our growth and there's like a workbook that you offer online, isn't there? A Frientimacy workbook?
Yeah,
and
the book.
Sharing that with everybody? And the
everyone has access to it. They can just go to Frientimacy.com or ShastaNelson.com and get there that way too. But Frientimacy.com, and it's a workbook that they can download for free to go along with the book. And the book itself actually is kind of workbooky style. There's a lot of practices, and every single chapter we're talking about has like evaluation tools and practices and mantras and stuff like that. But yeah, the workbook helps people do a lot more of the evaluation and the application to their own life, kind of asking the questions that will help them say, what friendship is this showing up in my life, and how do I respond, and how can I respond differently? And so kind of helping bring awareness and consciousness around our relationships.
Right. Perfect. You know what? I want to say Candace has one more question, so I want to make sure we get to it. So Candace asks, if you have taken a withdrawal from a friendship a little too soon, can these mistakes be overcome, or should we let it be? Sometimes an apology for an awkward social moment is not enough for the other person. Any thoughts on that?
If we say the first part of the question again?
If you've taken a withdrawal from a friendship a little too soon, can these mistakes be overcome, or should we let it be? Sometimes an apology for an awkward social moment is not enough for the other person. Any thoughts?
Yeah, that's a thoughtful question. I don't think there's a rule for all, but I would say in theory, I would be likely to say, yes, it's worth an apology. It's worth saying, I'm so sorry, I pulled away. I realized that I just got nervous or insecure, and I don't want to be that way. I'd much rather come, whatever it is, and kind of own our stuff. And I think that's a great, not make a huge deal about it, but kind of own it and say, I do like you, and I'd love to see you, and whatever. I think is totally awesome. And if they don't warm up to that, then I don't think we need to keep forcing it or pushing it. But I think it's good exercise for us to practice owning our stuff and being willing to show up and put. I am not a fan of this, like the ball is in their court attitude. I don't believe I need to do one thing and then they need to do one thing and then I need to do one thing. That's really, really screwed us up. So I don't think we ever need to say, well, they reached out to me last time or I did it last time, so I shouldn't do it again. I think absolutely. I I reach out multiple times to friends. I'll say, oh, I'm doing a party, come, everyone who can come. And then I'll reach out, I'm going to be in your neck of the woods. And, you know, if they repeatedly say no, like 4 times in a row, like, okay, I'm not going to, like, hound you.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to take each of those personally. As if they're like, oh,
Right.
I would love to, but I can't. I'm going to trust them, and I'm going to try again. So I would say try again, Candace.
Right. Right. What do you have to lose?
No.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Shasta, this has been amazing. My one last question I always like to ask everybody is, what message are you most passionate about that you want our viewers to really get before we sign off?
I want your viewers to really get that I actually don't think there's anything more important to their life than their relationships. And anybody who's passionate about personal growth needs to be in relationship, because this is where personal growth happens. You can read a book on boundaries, but it's only in relationships where you get to practice it. You can work with a therapist on how to forgive people, but it's only in a relationship where you get to practice it. You can have an awareness that you have abandonment issues, but it's only in a relationship where you get to practice showing up fully. I really believe that our relationships show us where our growth needs to happen and is the most perfect place for our growth. And I happen to be somebody who's like, I mean, I hear people who are 60 say, I don't care what people think, it's so freeing. And I think, if I can get there when I'm 40, let me do it. Like, I am like, I'm going to dive head in to my friendships and learn everything I can learn and grow so that I have much enjoyment of being healthy as possible. And I think it's going to be awkward, absolutely. And I guess I would just say to them, don't use awkwardness and uncomfortableness as, don't let that be the litmus of whether something's right to do or not. If it's awkward, of course it's awkward. We want to be liked, and so everything's going to feel awkward, but that doesn't mean it's wrong, and we need to still lean in and practice friendship.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. I love the saying, when we walk through our fears, we don't have to have them anymore. So, you know, the more you do it, the easier it is. So, but Shasta, this has been such a pleasure having you. And like I said, thank you for making such a profound difference in my friendships, and for all the women that you've impacted across the world. So with that, I'd love to have you back when you have your next thing. How can people get a hold of you?
Well, girlfriendcircles.com is the best way, and this is a learning community where we invite women from all around the world to join us, and I teach in that community every single month, and we pick a different theme and practice that, kind of like, I call it like our gym membership for our friendship, so people are certainly welcome to engage with me there. Otherwise, ShastaNelson.com, there's a contact form there, and all the ways to follow me and interact with me is on that.
Well, very good. Thank you so much, and it's been a great hour talking with you, and hopefully we'll have you back again soon for another book or whatever new project you're into. So thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right. Wow, that was a great hour with Shasta Nelson, CEO of GirlfriendCircles.com and author of Frientimacy and Friendships Don't Just Happen. You've got to get these books, you guys. I mean, I'm telling you, if you really want connection in your life, read her books, get on her website, and really get committed to developing the kind of connections you want in your life. I've got a couple of announcements, and then we're going to sign off for the evening. I always do a coaching tip every week since I'm a coach. And since we're talking about friendships this week, I thought a great tip would be to just take a moment to ask yourself, on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, what level of satisfaction would you say you have regarding the intimacy you have in your current friendships? Scale from 1 to 10, okay? The other question I have is, what level of satisfaction do you have in the quantity of close friendships that you would like? And again, scale from 1 to 10. If you're rating yourself any less than an 8, you need to go to ShastaNelson.com and take her quiz, because this will help you really get clear about the areas of the triangle, you know, whether it's vulnerability, consistency, or, you know, the 3 different sections of the triangle that you need to address. And do yourself a favor. You deserve the connection that you want in your life, and a lot of us just were never taught how to accomplish that. The other thing I want to mention is I am a life coach, and I love empowering my clients to really be true to themselves and live their highest calling. And my perfect clients are women that are similar in age to me, mid-50s, that are at a place where they're really ready to move to the next level of fulfillment in being true to themselves and feeling like they just want to make the impact and have the meaning that they want in their life and their work. So if you're interested in the kind of coaching I offer, please go to marygiuliani.net and the coaching section. What else? Oh, if you want to know what guests are coming up, please go to my website and go to the free newsletter, and you will get a weekly email sharing all the different guests that we've got coming up. I've also got a quiz on there that you can take about being true to you. And, oh, next week, we have Liz Vassy. Now, Liz Vassy, you might recognize her name. She has been she's been an actress and a writer for 30 years. She was on CSI for 5 years, and also she played Wendy, and then she was also on All My Children back in the day, and she was a teenager then, Emily Ann. She's also was a regular on ER and The Tick and 2.5 Men. Well, now she's got this wonderful new project where she's the producer and director of this new documentary called The Human Race, where she's really focusing on people that are between 50 and 90 years old that are running and exercising and really debunking the myth of once you're over 50 that you really can't be that active or that physical, and just really helping people raise consciousness about how, you know, after you turn 50, it's about getting busy living versus getting busy dying. So she's really excited about this documentary, and so please tune in next week for Liz Vassy. And let's see, I think other than that, my last thing is always do one thing tomorrow. Make a commitment to do one thing to be true to yourself, and you'll be amazed at what will happen. And make it a great week, okay? Bye, everybody.